Hmm. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new video. I just recorded this video and I found out the audio didn't fucking work. So, anyways, so in this video, I would like to talk about how to make decisions in a complex world. So, first of all, what does that even mean? What am I talking about here? So, first of all, we have to understand the difference between a complex world and a complicated world. So, in a complicated world, there are many, many moving parts, and that can appear to be overwhelming from the outside, and it very well may be overwhelming. However, there is a very clear cause and effect relationship between all the parts. So if you change one part of, for example, the plane, you can very reliably predict how that will interact with the other parts of the plane. If you remove all the screws from the wing will fall off. You can determine that 100% of the time. If you change the diameter of the pipes that are moving the fuel around, you can predict, empirically predict the flow rate, the change in flow rate of the fuel through the plane. And that will have downstream consequences that can be predicted through mathematical modeling. Now, that is pretty fucking chill. Unfortunately, the real world, I mean, the world that most of us find important, doesn't quite work that way. So, the world we tend to habit, I mean, although complicated systems do very well exist, the world that we inhabit is complex. Now, this doesn't necessarily imply a great number of parts. What it implies is that the interactions of those parts is unpredictable. So this bowl of spaghetti here has significantly fewer parts than a 747. However, I mean, there are probably like 30 fucking noodles in there, right? And 747 has like 25 quadrillion screws or whatever the fuck, right? Now, if you were to remove a screw out of a 747, you can reliably predict how that's going to influence the system. However, just try, for example, imagine pulling the end of this piece of spaghetti out of the fucking pile and try to predict exactly what will happen to this fucking pile of spaghetti. You're not going to be able to do it. It's a complex system. And that is a real problem uh, when it comes to the way that we tend to operate and the way we tend to operate in the world. So I'm going to pivot a little bit to organizational decision making, but this also applies to just our regular life. The way that organizations tend to make decisions and tend to operate in the world is as if the world is a complicated world, as if it's like a 747 versus a fucking bowl of spaghetti. Um, so what we typically try to do is we try to predict and control. So what do I mean by that? Well, typically we try to make accurate predictions about the future, and then we try to control the system so that it works in line with those predictions. We try to control the variables based on the predictions to get to the outcome we want. And if we don't get the outcome we want, we assume there's a problem with our model, or a person who made the model, or someone fucked up, and so someone gets in trouble. Now, just imagine if you tried to fucking drive a bike the way that we make decisions in most organizational contexts. Just imagine, for example, if you if we tried to make if we tried to ride a bike this way, we would be like, hey, so we're trying to ride our fucking bike to the end of the park. And so what we're gonna do is we need to mathematically model exactly the path the bike is gonna have to go on. At each second, we're gonna have to predict what's gonna happen, and ahead of time, we're going to program in, the angle you hold the handlebar. We're gonna have to calculate the number of fucking newtons of force you're putting on the pedal at each instant, at each, moment in time. And so, okay, at time one, we're going to have the handlebars positioned at 14 degrees, and we need 30 newtons of force on the pedal. And then what happens is you try to do the plan, and inevitably, within fucking, maybe you get 2 seconds or something, and then something happens that you could never have predicted. There's like a fucking bird shit on the wheel, and that changes the mathematical properties of the bike at that instant. And then you try to keep using the model that you were in, but it no longer works. You're no longer adaptive. That model no longer is effective. So, there's a fucking pebble in the road. There's a little bit of fucking wind that came that you couldn't have predicted. And then now all of your calculations are wrong. And then instead of accounting for that, instead of being like, yeah, okay, well, it makes sense that this model didn't work because the world is complex and unpredictable. Instead, we go like, well, how can we make it so this never happens again? And who do we fire here? Like that's just fucking preposterous. And it is goofy awe. Now, the maximum intelligence way to make decisions here in this context is we sense and respond. What do I fucking mean now? So, basically, we each moment we're getting information, we're getting input, and in the present moment we're making decisions to respond to that sensory data. We are, for example, if we're riding a bike, to use that analogy again, instead of planning ahead of time and being like, oh yeah, we need to do all that shit, I'm not going to explain it again. Instead, it's pretty obvious. We're like going down the path, and then a fucking bird, that's a bird, takes a shit on the wheel. And then it's like, oh, okay, doesn't even matter. Well, to make it more realistic, let's just say this pile of shit is like 50 pounds. Because we're paying attention, we're sensing and responding in real time to the information. We're just like, oh, whatever, we'll just pedal a little bit harder. And we keep changing the amount of force, and we keep adjusting our wheel until we're stable and we're getting to where we need to go. Another example would be farming. So you can imagine when you're farming, if there are too many variables to predict exactly what's going to happen with each plant and whatever. So let's say, your timeline is like you want to have the plants done at, July 14 or something. And then July 14 rolls around, and you're like, well, fuck, these plants are not fucking ready. Well, we got to stick to our deadline. So let's fucking just harvest these, pull them out of the ground right now, and we'll like punish the manufacturer. Like, these seeds are terrible and the farmers are fucked. So we have to fire the fucking farmers and whatever. Whereas, if you're trying to run a farm that way, you're gonna be fucking going hungry. I'll tell you that much. But if you are using the sense and respond way, then there's no fucking problem, because every day, every moment, you're kind of, paying attention to the conditions. You're kind of noticing like, okay, well, we're not getting that as much sun as predicted. The soil seems to be have like slightly less nutrients than anticipated. So let's try, what's a workable solution here? And a workable solution would be, a solution that, it might improve things, it might not, but it probably won't make things worse. And so you just keep applying possible solutions, and then paying attention, because you're sensing the effect of your solution. And then you see, oh yeah, okay, well, that seems to have improved conditions, let's keep going down that path. And eventually, because you're paying attention, then you notice like, okay, well, these are ready to harvest, and so we're not going to do it at this predetermined time. We're going to wait until like, a good time comes around, and then we are going to pull it out at that time. So it could be July 15, and there's no problem. And this where this gets most interesting in my view is when you think about the way information is being processed in the organization. So typically, the way that new projects are done or new initiatives happen in an organization is, the CEO sits there and is like, so I see that our quarterly numbers are not quite what we need them to be. So I'm going to say we have to fucking do this thing and this thing and this thing, and you all better fucking do it. Um, and, that can work. But a much more efficient way is if you distribute the information processing through the organization. So, you know, there are people working um, all throughout the company, and there are small micro problems that come up, and these people have perspectives that come up. They have possible solutions they're thinking about. And so, for example, if you have like a beer manufacturing company, and you have the people who are loading the trucks, and they notice like, we noticed that we have a theory that we're getting things into the truck at a much slower rate than we could if we change the cart wheels, and if we assign somebody to be dedicated to just managing the carts and maintaining them, because we don't currently have someone like that. Then typically what would have to happen is then that person, that employee, would have to talk to their manager, and the manager thinks, oh, maybe that's a good idea. Let's talk to the other managers. And then that goes up to the CEO, and the CEO is like, yeah, that might be a good idea. And then what happens next is then the CEO is like, hey, everybody, we're going to do this new thing. And I'm telling you, we have to do it at this time. And if you don't do it, you're fired. Um, and then, the experiment isn't able to mature in its own timeline. It's not able to mature like one of these beautiful little plants here. Because if you come up with your own idea and you decide to implement it, you care about the idea, so you're much more likely to persist with it, to change it until it really is a workable solution. Um, and so what ends up happening is this thing gets tried out, it gets like managed into everybody, and nobody really gives a fuck about it. Like, why do we care about this? I don't give a shit about it. And then it doesn't have an effect. And then everyone's like, well, I guess it was a waste of time. Whereas if you have more of an organic model, which the analogy is that the business is more like a living organism than it is like a 747. Um, so, you know, im- imagine how inefficient it would be if you had to make every decision with your conscious mind about what's happening in your body. Instead of like, just imagine if you had to think about like, okay, I am going to extend my hand to get this bottle of water. Okay, so I have to think about, okay, I have to extend my bicep, let it relax. I have to contract my tricep. I have to do all those fucking things. Like, that's not going to work very well. And the reason we can actually easily grab things is the information processing is distributed throughout our whole body, and there's all kinds of decision making that's happening in our nervous system that is not centralized in our brain. So we should be using this kind of decision making in our businesses, and that will actually improve productivity and efficiency, and make it so that we're able to adapt to opportunities and adapt to changing circumstances in real time. And companies that are able to do that, that are able to be more responsive, that are able to allow information processing to be more distributed, those companies are going to evolve and iterate faster. They're going to find solutions faster. And those companies are going to outcompete companies that are more rigid. And yeah, anyways. Well, I'm pretty sure this video was a lot shittier than the first one I recorded. But life's life. All right. Thanks for watching.